looking, throwing in the end zone.
Montana, touchdown, John Taylor.
Young to the air, Young to Jerry Rice, touchdown San Francisco.
Young stumbles on the way back and fires up the middle. Pass is caught by Owens.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the 49ers Plus podcast. I'm your host, Al Moriello, and this is your source for the most objective 49ers discussion, plus entertaining and timely sports and pop culture topics. And this week, we're going to be talking about some transactions the 49ers made. NFL Network's top 100 players for 2023 were released. We'll discuss where the 49ers players fell. Kyle Shanahan on why he prefers joint practices over preseason games and how he evaluates QBs in practice. We'll talk about the salary cap cost of the 49ers QBs this year and next year, why that is important, and I will make my roster prediction for the 53-man roster, obviously before this first preseason game against the Raiders. In the plus section, we're going to be talking the Hall of Fame class this past weekend, how it was not a great class, and looking back at some previous classes and if there are players that deserve to be in the Hall of Very Good. Instead, the Women's World Cup, the U.S. obviously getting bounced by Sweden, but we're going to be talking about equal pay. Anthony Davis of the Lakers getting the richest annual extension ever and why that is a terrible idea. More Pac-12 teams bailing for a different conference, and I will give a review of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem movie. But like always, it starts with the Niners, so let's get right into it.
Let's talk Niners.
So to start us off, the 49ers made a few transactions. Over the past week, they signed cornerback Anthony Everett and placed cornerback Terrence Mitchell on season-ending IR. Everett, 5'11", 185 pounds, drafted by the Ravens in the fourth round of the 2018 draft out of Alabama. He's been with Baltimore and Las Vegas, has 27 career starts. Terrence Mitchell was signed by the team on July 25th. Then the 49ers went out and signed a defensive end, Dalen Hayes, and placed defensive end Darryl Johnson on season-ending IR. Hayes, 6'3", 253 pounds, drafted again by the Ravens in the fifth round of the 2021 draft out of Notre Dame. Darryl Johnson signed with the team on June 6th. And with Eli Mitchell hurt with a hip issue, he'll be out about a week. The 49ers wound up working out four running backs: Duke Johnson, who last year played briefly with the Bills; Brian Hill, last stint was in 2021 with the 49ers; Jeremy McNichols, Tennessee in 2021; and Jason Huntley with the Eagles in 2021. And the 49ers wound up signing Jeremy McNichols and waived running back Ronald Awatt. McNichols was actually with the 49ers in Shanahan's first year in 2017. He played in 2 games. No stats. His best season was 2020 with the Titans, 47 rushes, 204 yards, and a touchdown with 12 receptions for 55 yards. So if Eli Mitchell's obviously not going to be playing, McCaffrey's not going to be playing, other than in the joint practices, will not be playing in preseason games, they'll get an extended look at Jordan Mason, Ty Davis-Price, Kalen Labor in the undrafted rookie free agent, and now Jeremy McNichols. So transitioning from transactions to the NFL Network's top 100, the last 10 were revealed yesterday, Monday, August 7th, and the 49ers wound up having 8 total players in the top 100. Nick Bosa came in at number 4, Trent Williams, 14, Fred Warner, 15, George Kittle, 19, Christian McCaffrey, 35, Deebo Samuel, 61, Talanoa Hufanga, 78, and Dre Greenlaw, 79. So a nice even split of 4 players on offense, 4 players on defense, and 4 players in the top 20. San Francisco had the most players in the top 100 with 8, followed by Philadelphia and Dallas with 7, Miami and the Chargers with 6, the Jets with 5, and Buffalo, New Orleans, and Baltimore with 4. So not surprising, San Francisco, Philadelphia, and Dallas really thought to be the top 3 teams in the NFC East, in the NFC in terms of making it to the Super Bowl. The Chiefs actually only had 3 players in the top 100, which just obviously goes to show what a difference maker Patrick Mahomes is. Buffalo with 4 players. Josh Allen, obviously a difference maker as well, but just can't get over the top, over the hump, either the Bengals or the Chiefs now. And for those of you that are wondering how the rest of the NFC West fared, the Rams with 3, the Seahawks with 3, and the Arizona Cardinals with 1. So listen, 8 players versus 7 for Philadelphia and Dallas and 6 for Miami and Chargers. It's not like the 49ers blew anybody away in terms of the number of players in the top 100. But between the split, offense and defense, where the players are at every layer on the defense between safety, linebackers, and D-line, and then on offense, you have a running back, a tight end, a receiver, a lineman. It's balancing out, even though the roster, you could say in some ways, it's top heavy. It's also a pretty deep roster as well. This isn't the Rams roster from 2 or 3 years ago that really just had stars and a bunch, 4 or 5 stars and a bunch of nothing behind it, making the Rams roster really like a bottom 5 roster in the league this year. The Super Bowl window to me for them is this year and next year. And we'll get into a little bit more of the whys a little bit later, but obviously a very talented roster. This team, much like really any team in the NFL, will go as far as its quarterback play takes them. Now, Eric Armstead, defensive tackle, about a month or so ago said this team will go as far as the defense takes them within reason. You could have a dominant defense and a terrible offense. You're not going anywhere. You still have to play complementary football. And this is a league that no matter how dominant your defense is, we've seen it game after game, how, a team like the 49ers or the Bills or another, the Eagles, another, top defensive unit, defenses wear down over the course of a game. Offenses generally don't. And when it comes to 2, top 5 teams playing, most of the time, the way the NFL is geared, it's geared toward the offense, and the team with the better offense, maybe the better quarterback, more skill position players, more talented play caller, whatever that combination is, it's the offense that usually will win out in the end. We'll see how Brock Purdy, QB1, presumed, unless something crazy happens, takes that next step, a full season of McCaffrey, Debo in better shape, and hopefully the injury bug stays far, far away from this team. But a talented roster, talented on paper, is definitely different than putting it into practice. They've obviously put it into practice 2 out of the past 3 years. They've made it to the NFC Championship game. 3 out of the last 4, at least the NFC Championship game. A lot can happen between now and the beginning of February, but they are set and poised to make another run. Now let's transition to head coach Kyle Shanahan, who discussed why he prefers joint practices to preseason games. And the 49ers will be leaving for Las Vegas. I don't know if it's today or tomorrow, maybe even Thursday, ahead of their preseason game with the Raiders on Sunday, the 13th of August. But here's a quote from Kyle Shanahan. In joint practices, you do normal plays. You get to put guys in situations. You never know how a game is going to unfold, what the situations are, or who's in there. Sometimes you get in situations where you can't do stuff based off of protections and things like that in games. So in practice, you get everything done, and you get to learn a lot more about the guys, to me, than you do in the games. On top of that, he said that starters will get all their reps in practice before sitting out the game on Sunday against the Raiders. It's the same approach that Shanahan used last year when they had joint practices with the Vikings before leading up to a preseason game a few days later in Minnesota. Shanahan's been saying this for a while now, right? And when the preseason consisted of 4 games, he was a proponent of cutting it down to 3. The NFL didn't really listen to him based on his rationale. They listened because they went to 17 regular season games and cut the preseason down from 4 to 3. Obviously, it's glorified exhibition. It matters for bottom of the roster players to show what they can do. Players, 50, 51, 52, 53, 54, 55, 56. Teams that are really fighting for that last linebacker spot, last offensive line spot, or D-line receiver. Generally your top 3 at receiver, at running back, top 5 or 6 on the O-line, top 5 or 6 on the D-line are generally going to be set. So it's really a showcase for the young players, the rookies, undrafted rookie free agents, or teams that are new to your squad. And you've always heard that in preseason games, teams are playing a vanilla offense. They're playing a vanilla defense. They don't want to show anything or give anything away for the regular season, which is just silly because scouting is going to look at maybe preseason a little bit. They're going to go back to last year. There's always going to be tape on what you do. Even if there's a brand new regime, like in Denver with Sean Payton, head coach, offensive coordinator, a new defensive coordinator, they'll go back to his Saints tape, wherever his DC was last year. They're going to go back to whenever that coach was a defensive coordinator just to see what the tendencies are. So I think the preseason could be a platform to get a little bit more experience with what's in your playbook. Say it's even 5 plays you may lean upon in the regular season. It's going to get mixed in with the rest of the wash, offensively or defensively, when it comes to preseason games. But that's been Shanahan's thought process since he's become the head coach of the 49ers. Now let's keep it on practice, and another quote on how Shanahan evaluates 49ers QBs in practice. He does not keep track of stats in practice, guys. That's for you 49er content heroes out there, and journalists do it as well, that want to say Brock was, 8 of 11 and Darnold was, 4 of 7 and Lance was 7 of 12. What it doesn't matter. What coaches are looking at is when they go back, if they're, filming the practice or even in real time, did they make the right read? Did the ball get out on time, in rhythm to where it needed to go? Now, a completion, it could have been a great play by the defense. It could have been a drop by the offense. Could have been tipped to the line of scrimmage. A lot of reasons why anything can happen on any given play. The whys, or the how the play develops, is what Shanahan and other offensive coaches are looking for. Same thing with defensive coaches. You're looking at pass rushing technique. You're looking at how linebackers are dropping into coverage. Are they playing the right zone? Are they picking up man right? The same with safeties and corners. Getting the play calls in. Are the players on the field making the right plays, running the right routes, making the right protections, making the right drops and blitzes? It's communicating, really, at this point. More than it's this player had 3 sacks and this quarterback had 2 picks, or how many catches a receiver had. Stats don't matter in the preseason, guys. I understand hero content creators. You want to capture the stats, especially for quarterbacks, to craft the narrative, whether you are pro Lance, pro Purdy, or anti either one of them. And I see a lot of 49er Twit-diots that are Twitter twats, if you just want to hear me say the word again, that are doing that. It doesn't matter. And again, I go back to, like in last podcast, how even journalists ain't good at math, because when you line up 5 journalists who are at the same practice, they generally have different attempts and completions for every quarterback, which is crazy. Because again, counting to no more than 12 shouldn't be that hard. The only variability is when some journalists, they consider a pass that was made an actual sack, if the D lineman or whoever actually, tagged the quarterback, or so maybe, he or she wouldn't count that pass attempt as an attempt or a completion or a touchdown, whatever it may be. But the variability in the numbers, when the numbers aren't that high among journalists that I respect versus content creators that, hey, I'm doing the same thing and it's not a competitive thing, but I see on Twitter, guys, I see what your biases are. I see the narratives you're attempting to craft, and I see a whole bunch of morons that are following you that are eating that crap up. Again, why I say I might be the most subjective source for 49ers insight and discussion. I think journalists are more objective. They're there. I'll give them that. But from what I'm seeing on Twitter, maybe I shouldn't say the most objective, but I'll keep going with it. It's got a nice ring to it. One of the most objective content creators out there. I'm hanging my hat on that. Here was the quote, long story long, about how Shanahan evaluates QBs. We watch each play, how it is, how you see he performs, how consistent he is, how much he can stack up with the type of throws he makes, whether he's accurate, whether he gets to the right spot. Can he get it off with the pass rush? Half these aren't even getting off because we're not sacking guys out there. So you evaluate all that stuff. And that's why camp's a long time, month and a half, right? You get a real good feel as it goes, and you don't try to just put too much into that stuff each day. So I jumped the quote to give the explanation. Obviously, I knew what the quote was, so I understood the context and what Shanahan and other coaches are looking for. But a lot of content creators don't out there, and they need to post something every 10 or 15 minutes on Twitter, and they'll just post numbers or random thoughts and, a whole lot of bullshit, at least from what I'm seeing. But let's stick with the quarterbacks, and let's talk about cap hits and total QB cost for this year and next year per Spotrac. Again, a fantastic site, not only for football contracts, but really sports across the board. This upcoming season, 2023, San Francisco is the 15th highest salaried team in terms of quarterbacks. Middle of the pack, basically, right? They're carrying 4 QBs, $16.3 million devoted to QBs. That is 6.88% of the salary cap. Now, teams that are behind them that next year, 2025, will leapfrog the 49ers because of extensions they gave out to quarterbacks that have minimal cap hits this year in 2023, but will jump them. The Seahawks with Geno Smith, Joe Burrow and the Bengals, he's going to get an extension. The Jaguars and Trevor Lawrence, there'll be an extension coming. The Chargers and Justin Herbert, mega extensions, not going to kick in until next year. And the Bears, assuming they keep Justin Fields, next year, 2025, will obviously be a big year for Justin Fields. Now, in 2024, the 49ers go from 15th to 25th in quarterback salaries with $11.85 million committed to quarterbacks. It's just Purdy and Lance. But let's hypothetically say Lance stays on the team. His cap hits about $11 million. And let's say they re-sign Darnold to something similar to what they have, what he signed to for 2023. Then they would still rank no higher than 20th in the league in QB salary. The 11.85 currently would be 4.93% of the salary cap next year. That percentage is going to go up because they will have a third quarterback signed. These are the numbers, folks. These are the values. Why I said earlier that I think the 49ers championship window is 2023, this year coming up, and next season, 2024. You still have extensions for Nick Bosa to think about. Talanoa Hufanga. Brandon Ayuk had his 5th-year option picked up. 2024, he'll count $14 million against the cap. They should extend him. Charvarius Ward, next season will be the 3rd year of his contract. Do they extend him? Do they look to go cheaper? Dre Greenlaw. George Kittle's contract is going to be coming up in 2025. Now, there are ways to manipulate this, right? You can extend players, you can restructure contracts and keep kicking the financial can down the road, a la the Saints or the Buccaneers historically, or teams that have done that. That's not something that 49er management likes to do or has historically done under this regime. But it's the curse of having a talented roster, right? 8 players in the top 100. They're going to want to and deserve to get paid, whether it's with the 49ers or someone else, whether a player like a Debo or an Ayuk, if they can't afford both, one might get traded. Fred Warner and Dre Greenlaw can't afford both, one might get traded. That's why they drafted 2 linebackers this year, D. Winters and Jalen Graham. Hopefully they hit on one as a replacement, so to speak. The Niners are about less than $10 million under the cap this season, and they are $13 million over the cap for 2024. Now, something like a Trent Williams could retire, and if he does, then they have a big problem at left tackle. But if he retires, that would save about $12 to $14 million on the cap. An extension for Ayuk would save money. I mean, there's ways to manipulate it. A lot of people that say that the cap isn't real. It's real, but it's a real thing that you could really manipulate. But the 49ers, again, are not one of those teams that look like this, that look at the salary cap as a credit card. You just keep charging, and you get hit with a ton of interest in later years. We will see how the team handles that in the coming season. But again, 2023, 2024, right now, very reasonable quarterback costs. Hopefully the 49ers can capitalize on that. And a quick Brock Purdy stat for folks, since we're talking about quarterbacks, even though it's cost. Found an interesting stat. Whether you're a Purdy fan, homer, hater, or just like the fact that he played really well during his 8-game stretch last season, he led the NFL #1 in play action passes, in rhythm passes, pass plays when there was shifts, motions, when he was not blitzed and throwing outside the numbers. Take it for what it will, for what you want. You know, people can pick holes in stats any which way you want, but the #1 passer rating across those 5 pre and post snap metrics. And before we get into the roster prediction, I know last week I had the section, 49er Twit-diots, bad 49er takes, Twitter takes, and 49er Twitter twats, and I had about 7 of them. Didn't really go hunting for that much, although they're just overflowing on Twitter. It's like, I open up the app on my phone and people are just vomiting bad takes, stupid takes like crazy, and doubling down on their stupid takes because that's their shtick. I want to believe it's a shtick because if they actually believe what they're saying, then 49er fans on average, not as smart as maybe we believe that we are. But that's the same for all fan bases, man. I live in the Northeast. Yankee fans are a bunch of mouth-breathing mongoloids at times. Met fans the same. Giants, Jets, Rangers, Knicks, Nets. It's all the same. Fan is short for fanatic. You take critical thinking and logic out of things when it's, I'll use my Northeast voice. You got to get rid of Brian Cashman, and you got to get rid of Giancarlo Stanton because they're terrible. I'm a knuckle dragger. You could say that, right? And I've heard it a lot, but you got to have someone willing to take on Giancarlo Stanton's contract. Is there going to be a better GM than Brian Cashman? What are you going to do if you're Steve Cohen? What are you going to do as a Mets, Jets fan, Giants fan, GM, etc.? So you could always think irrationally about something, but then it always comes back to, if you fire Shanahan, who are you going to get? If you trade a certain player or let a player go, you better hope you have someone behind him that's adequate or better to replace them. But so one 49ers Twit-diot had this statement that he made. Brock did not win a game he finished. The games were a lot more about the team than one individual. So again, Trey Homer does not want to give Purdy the credit he's due. And it's amazing how many fans, and again, I'm not a Purdy homer. I'm a Purdy fan, just like I'm a Lance fan, just like I'm a Darnold fan, just like I'm a Brandon Allen fan. Because you know why? I'm a 49er fan, guys, just like you guys and gals out there are out there as well. But what's being forgotten by so many people is how good Brock Purdy looked as a rookie. A rookie, guys, that wasn't really getting any sort of, if you want to call, meaningful backup quarterback snaps until week 3, and then wasn't the starter until week 13, right? So how many snaps did he really get in OTAs, in minicamp, in training camp, behind Lance and Jimmy? Not a lot. So what he did, and obviously got more snaps as the season progresses, he became the starter, but what he did as a rookie compared to Trey Lance looking completely lost, getting significant backup reps in 2021, his rookie season, OTAs, minicamp, training camp, was not even close to prepared. Why? Because that was the plan. He was never supposed to be ready his rookie year. It makes it all the more impressive what Brock Purdy did. And if you want to say he wasn't the catalyst of the offense, he was the catalyst and driver. If you want to define them differently, knock yourself out. If you want to say Christian McCaffrey was the reason why the team exploded the way it did, I think that's fair. But I think it's split 50-50. McCaffrey and Purdy. Again, the team led the league in points once Purdy took over, and they jumped by a substantial margin versus previous 49er quarterbacks by 4 to 5 more points per game. And again, it doesn't matter that you have McCaffrey on the team now, that you have Debo, Ayuk, Juszczyk, Kittle. If you don't have the gunner, if you don't have the point guard, right, making highly efficient, highly accurate, in rhythm, on-time throws to make defenses respect the pass so the run becomes even that more dangerous, it doesn't matter. So to say that the games were a lot more about the team than one individual, yes, he was surrounded by a really good team. And would Brock Purdy have fared just as well last year on the Colts or the Texans or the Cardinals or another trash team? Of course not. But Brock Purdy could have flamed out last year like dozens, hundreds of thousands of other quarterbacks, maybe thousands is too high of a number, but hundreds of other quarterbacks have come into and out of the NFL because they just couldn't play. Brock Purdy could play, and conservatively, I'll say if he's 50% of the reason, along with McCaffrey, why the offense exploded, fine. But to say that he's a non-factor is disingenuous. It shows your Lance colors. So now, roster prediction. So I'm doing this before the first preseason game at the Raiders. I'm doing this before the first joint practice. Not like that matters, a joint practice at Las Vegas. And now, I'm going to give the caveat, right? Like, I'm not going to get this 100% right. I probably am not going to get this 80 to 90% right. Who knows who's going to get hurt? Who knows who's going to really play well and lift, and open Shanahan or Lynch's eyes or defensive coordinator Steve Wilks. And one of the other things I tried to do also, which is because I'm a big nerd, I started looking at, well, who could make the 16-team practice squad? The 53-man roster is infinitely more important than a 16-man practice squad, right? But I was looking at it through the lens of if it became between two players, who has either one, a better shot of making it onto the practice squad, or two, can make it on the practice squad at all. Because on a 16-man practice squad, you can have only 6 players with no limit on how many years they've been in the league. So, a veteran that's been in the league for 5 years, 8 years, 10 years, whatever it may be. And you could have only up to 10 players with no more than 2 seasons, which is why 10 out of 16 players on a practice squad are young players. It's a developmental practice squad, obviously, right? But it's increased in years from, I think, 12 to 16 during COVID, and it's able to get more veterans on a team, on a practice squad, to have them still be part of a team, part of the conversation, and with the elevations of being able to elevate a player up to 3 times a season, it's giving veteran players who would have been out of the league chances to hang on more, to make a roster. So while that should not have been, and the practice squad wasn't my driving force, I think it did maybe influence, 2 to 4 decisions on what I made on the active roster. Full disclaimers. All right, so let's go. All right, so there's 3 specialists. Nick Moody is going to be the kicker, Mitch Wishnowsky is going to be the punter, and Tabor Pepper is going to be your long snapper. So that goes from 53 to 50. So now we're down to 50 players to make the team. Quarterback, they're going to keep 3 folks unless they get a ridiculous offer for Trey Lance. And they won't unless someone gets significantly hurt. And even then, I would say, Kyle Shanahan, your quarterback position is cursed. Let that not be the position that sinks you again this year. So it's going to be Brock, it's going to be Trey, and it's going to be Sam Darnold. And I think Brandon Allen, since he's been in the league for 8 years, when he gets released, he does not go through waivers. If he agrees to, he could join the practice squad, and that's where I have him slotted. Running backs, 5 in total. It's going to be McCaffrey. It's going to be Eli Mitchell, Jordan Mason, and Ty Davis Price at fullback. Kyle Juszczyk. Now, Eli Mitchell, as I mentioned earlier, is injured with a hip strain. I mean, I think he's going to be, it's August 8th, right? The season starts September 10th. He will be healed. Is there the outside possibility that he re-aggravates it and maybe ends up on the physically unable to perform list or short-term IR? Sure. But right now, those are your 4 running backs. On the practice squad, undrafted rookie free agent Kalen Laybourne and recently signed Jeremy McNichols. At tight end, I can see the 49ers keeping 4. Obviously, George Kittle is a lock, but I also think third-round pick Cameron Latou out of Alabama is a lock as well. So that leaves Ross Dwelley, Charlie Werner, 7th-round pick Braden Willis, and Troy Fumagalli fighting for 2 roster spots. And to me, Charlie Werner is just a blocker. Now, that's important in Shanahan's offense, especially since it's run heavy, but he gives you absolutely nothing as a receiving threat. Ross Dwelley, much more of a receiver than a blocker, but hasn't been involved in the passing game as much as I would like to see him, especially giving Kittle some plays off. And then you have a rookie in Willis and a player who's been around for 5 or so years in Troy Fumagalli. Here's what I would like to see. Of the 4, Kittle, Latou, Ross Dwelley, and Braden Willis. 2 rookies, 2 veterans on the roster. I think Charlie Werner gets released. Maybe Fumagalli or Werner ends up in the practice squad. But you need to shake things up at the position. And there's no guarantee that a 7th-round draft pick is going to make this roster. But again, in the spirit of having 2 veterans, and certainly a dependable one on Kittle that you can rely on, and 2 rookies that bring more athleticism and upside, might not be the blocker, or certainly isn't the blocker that Charlie Werner is, but I would sacrifice that for a little bit more athleticism and threat offensively. So 4 tight ends on the 2023 roster. On the offensive line, you have your 5 starters: Trent Williams, Aaron Banks, Jake Brendel, Spencer Buford, and Colton McKivitz. The only other lock I see on the roster is center guard John Feliciano last year with the Giants. I think they're going to carry 8 offensive linemen in total on their 53. And the next 2, I believe Jalen Moore will be the swing tackle. So Feliciano is the backup at center and guard. Jalen Moore, the backup at the 2 tackle spots. And I'm actually going to give the 8th spot to Matt Pryor, only because he's an older player. He might not be able to, depending on the choices they make for the practice squad, he might not be able to fit there. And he started games in the league at both tackle positions, and I think he could slide to guard if needed. Of these 8 players, there really isn't a 9th or even a 10th that's worthy of the 53. Maybe Nick Zakiel. Last year was a rookie out of Fordham, played tackle. They're trying him out at center. Probably could play some guard as well. I think the 2 offensive linemen that stick on the practice squad are Leroy Watson, who's been actually getting some first-team reps when Trent Williams has a day off at left tackle. And again, Nick Zakiel as a center or guard option on the practice squad, in addition to international pathway player Alfredo Gutierrez, who will be on the practice squad as well, making that a 17-man practice squad if you have 1 international player. Do I feel great about the Matt Pryor pick over a Nick Zakiel? And I'm not even sure who else would enter the conversation. No, I don't feel great. But again, I was keeping the 16-man practice squad in mind because I'm a geek. And that's how I saw things shaking out. At receiver, I see them keeping 5. The locks are Debo, Ayuk, and Jawan Jennings. And behind that, I think it's Ray McLeod for return ability and Danny Gray for speed. I don't think they're going to give up on a 3rd-round pick, even though they did it with Trey Sermon last year at running back. I think they're too intrigued by his speed and to see how Gray is going to develop in joint practices and in preseason games. So to me, that means rookie 7th-round pick out of Michigan, Ronnie Bell, ends up on the practice squad along with veteran Willie Snead. Would I be shocked if Bell and Gray swap or Bell makes the 53-man roster? No. But right now, this is what I'm thinking. So that's offense. Defense, I went heavy on the D-line. The 49ers, John Lynch said that they want to get back to that 2019 type of team, type of pass rush. And I thought, well, 10 defensive linemen then sounds good to me. They might end up with actually 9. I'm just going to go 10 in this projection. So your starting 4 to me are Nick Bosa, Javon Hargrave, Eric Armstead, and Drake Jackson. Not surprising. The next 4, Cleveland Ferrell at D end, Robert Beal at D end, 5th round pick out of Georgia. I don't think they're going to give up on him in terms of a cut. And then your defensive tackles, Kevin Givens and Javon Kinlaw. Those 2 are both guaranteed money. If they cut either one of those players, they don't save anything. Givens, $2 million cap hit if he gets cut. Kinlaw, almost $5 million. They're not going anywhere. And the last 2 players, I like to have balance. So 5 D tackles, 5 D ends. T.Y. McGill, they gave about $400,000 or $500,000 in guaranteed money at D tackle, and Austin Bryant at D end from the Lions. Same sort of thing, about $400,000 in guaranteed money. Not a ton for each of them, but those are my 10. And again, I like balance, 5 D ends, 5 D tackles on the team. So bouncing down to the practice squad. So Kalia Davis, a D tackle from the 2022 draft, was held out based on coming back from an ACL reconstruction. I can easily see him making the team over T.Y. McGill. Easily. But again, I'm just thinking of the practice squad, and there's only 6 spots that you can have veterans with more than 2 seasons of experience. To me, I figure unless Kalia Davis shows out in the preseason, and he very well might, that he's an easier get on the practice squad, along with recent pickup Taco Charlton at D end and Spencer Wage, who could really play either D end or D tackle. I think there are 3 D linemen on the practice squad. Linebackers, I see them carrying 5. Fred Warner, Dre Greenlaw, and Oren Burks are the locks. 6th round pick D Winters, I see making it. And Demetrius Flanagan-Fowles, I see making it as well. I think he's guaranteed $1.25 million. That would be the cap hit if they release him. Again, not a ton of money, but I would be wary going 2 rookies out of the 5 linebackers. Flanagan-Fowles has been in the system for, I think, 3 or 4 years now. I think he's the safer bet right now to be on the team, make an impact on special teams, and contribute as a starter or an extended starter if needed. So that means 7th round pick Jalen Graham and 2nd-year player Marcelino McCrary Ball would be on the practice squad. Cornerback, the top 3 are set. Charvarius Ward, Diamador Lenore, and Isaiah Oliver are your 3 starters. To me, the next 2, Samuel Womack, he can play outside and inside behind Oliver. And Darrell Luter Jr., 5th round pick, hasn't practiced yet. I just don't think they're going to give up on a 5th round pick. Someone with that size, that length. He can play press. He has good speed and a bigger corner as well. For me, the practice squad becomes Anthony Averett. So he's like the veteran, one of the 6 over 2 years experience. I think Quantrez Knight, who was on the practice squad all of last year, makes it as well. And Deshaun Jameson, undrafted rookie free agent, who's been having a really nice camp. Again, it's the who has a better chance of ending up on the practice squad if released. Luter or Womack or Jameson. And I think it's Jameson. He's been playing really well. And if he makes the 53, that's awesome. Especially when you're an undrafted rookie free agent, making a team that's this talented. Awesome. But right now, again, where do I see him fit better? I will say the practice squad. I don't say it super confidently, but that's where I have him. And lastly, safety. Tayshaun Gibson and Talanoa Hufanga are your starters. Jair Brown, the rookie out of Penn State, and George Odom are the backups. I see Taylor Hawkins, 2nd-year player, on the practice squad. So again, this is my roster as of August 8th. I may do another one after the final preseason game if I can get it in before the first and only round wave of cuts are made. But I gave my disclaimers. I'm not trying to hedge anything or give any excuses why, if I don't hit 100% of these, I know I'm not. Just wanted to give some rationale as to who I think could make the roster and why some players might be better suited right now for the practice squad. So that concludes the 49ers section of the podcast. Stay right here. We're going to be talking about the NFL Hall of Fame, Women's World Cup, equal pay, Anthony Davis's ridiculous contract with the Lakers, the Pac-12 losing teams, and reviewing Turtles Mutant Mayhem movie. Stay with us.
It's plus time.
Hall of Fame inductions were this past weekend, highlighted, or if you want to say lowlighted, by the New York Jets versus Cleveland Browns game. But really, they were that game because you had Joe Thomas of the Browns inducted and Darrelle Revis and Joe Klecko of the New York Jets inducted. But this class, very, very not sexy, as witnessed by the people who were there seeing the ceremony. And if it was maybe half full in the stands or the chairs, that would be generous. Maybe closer to a third full. And I'm with Deion Sanders when he said, maybe there should be an upper room for the elite members of the Hall of Fame. There have been around 8 players getting inducted every year for the past 10, 20 years. And at least half the class in each one of those years, I don't want to say at least, up to half the class, there are players that I believe belong in the Hall of Very Good. But, Deion Sanders said it right in an interview with Peter King of NBC Sports. We've gotten soft. It's an open house, is it not? There should be at least an upper room within the Hall of Fame decided by the members for the truly elite to separate themselves from the rest of the inductees who changed the game. Now, the inductee, anyone who's inducted into the Hall of Fame, you're with your class. So when you go into the Hall of Fame, you're together with your class, or at least that's how I understand it. You're not per team or anything like that. It's, the class of 2023, 2022, 2021. And I was hard on this class, when I gave it a first pass. So Joe Thomas, the tackle out of, the Browns, 10 Pro Bowls, 6 times he was in first team All-Pro. Rondé Barber, cornerback of the Bucks, 4-time Pro Bowler. He was a first team All-Pro 3 times, a second team twice. Revis, for sure, a lock. He's one that passes the eye test, much like Joe Thomas did. 7-time Pro Bowler, 4-time first team All-Pro, and DeMarcus Ware, defensive end of the Cowboys and the Broncos, 9-time Pro Bowler, 4-time first team All-Pro, 3-time second team All-Pro. Someone like a Zach Thomas of the Dolphins had a nice career, 7-time Pro Bowler, 5-time first team All-Pro, and 2-time second team All-Pro. Do I think of Zach Thomas as a Hall of Famer? I really don't. Joe Klecko of the Jets, and I live in the tri-state area. Yes, he was a Pro Bowler 4 times and a first team All-Pro, twice, and a second team All-Pro 1 time. But Joe Klecko and Hall of Famer doesn't seem like it goes together, right? Like with a Hall of Famer, you should just know. You hear the name. It passes the eye test when you watch them on TV or historical clips. If it's someone, from the 60s, 70s, early 80s that I didn't get to watch myself. So that made me go back a couple classes to see, who are players that got in that don't really feel like Hall of Fame players. 2022 was Leroy Butler, safety of the Packers, Sam Mills, linebacker of the Panthers, Richard Seymour, defensive tackle of the Patriots, and Bryant Young, defensive tackle of the 49ers. All really good players, but Hall of Fame? I don't know. 2021, Isaac Bruce, wide receiver of the Rams, Steve Atwater, safety of the Broncos, Edgerrin James, running back of the Colts and Cardinals. Again, very good players, Pro Bowl players. Hall of Fame? 2020, Drew Pearson from the 70s. The Cowboys only made it to 3 Pro Bowls. John Lynch, safety of the Buccaneers and Broncos. And even Calvin Johnson of the Lions. Maybe of those 3, you could say maybe Calvin Johnson obviously showed the most dominance for maybe the longest period of time or had the most dominant seasons. But Pearson and Lynch, again, that like eye test type of thing. Maybe they should adopt what Major League Baseball does. Each voting cycle, members of the Baseball Writers Association of America name no more than 10 eligible players whom they consider worthy of the Hall of Fame. And to be enshrined, a player must be named on at least 75% of the voters' ballots. This year, only 2 players made into the Hall of Fame for baseball. 2022, there were 7 players. 2021, none. 2020, 4 players, and 2019, 6 players. I think the NFL Hall of Fame is too generous. And there's probably other reasons why there weren't, the chairs and the stands weren't packed for this year's class, but it wasn't a sexy class. It wasn't a dominant, I remember when that guy played and he was so awesome class. Darrelle Revis might have been the only one that jumps out at you. And Joe Thomas, he had over, I think, 10,600 consecutive snaps, which is more of an Iron Man streak than a dominant streak. But again, the number of Pro Bowlers and All-Pros, kind of undeniable. But Revis Island, right? There was no Barber Island. There was no Zach Thomas County or Joe Kleck. I mean, Joe Klecko was part of the sack exchange, but that was him and 3 other players, right? I don't know. When you hear the name, you should know. And there's far too many names each year that don't feel like Hall of Famers. So from Hall of Fame to the Women's World Cup, and the equal pay issue had come up again in ESPN or Yahoo and feeds with Megan Rapinoe retiring, now that the women's team unfortunately got bounced by Sweden. And I, maybe like some of you, I went to the initial and wrong conclusion of, if women's soccer wants equal pay, then it should just be as popular as men's soccer, and it should draw in just as much revenue as men's soccer. It's probably proportional to what the men's and women's World Cup tournaments draw. And it's really not the case. It's not, the women's team is not less popular, less viewers, or less tickets, or less ad revenue. In a lot of cases, it's more, actually. And yes, unfortunate that the women's team lost to Sweden. Tie game, they lost 5-4 in penalty kicks. No shame in losing to Sweden. Yes, the U.S. is the number 1 team in the world. Germany second, Sweden third. And Sweden has beaten the U.S. head-to-head 4 of their last 5 matches. So there's no shame in that. It's an upset, yes, but it's not a horrendous upset. FIFA did make some positive changes in terms of prize money for women's teams in the tournament. So for 2023, $30,000 a player for teams that make the group stage before they play in that round of 16, all the way up to $270,000 for each player from the winning team, the team that wins the World Cup. So that is progress, but it's still small and overshadowed financially by what the men's team not even brings in, what men's teams in FIFA in the World Cup tournament specifically are paid. Check out these prize money allocations, men's versus women, the last 3 World Cups. So men's in 2022, $440 million allocated to the 16 teams. Women's this year, $110 million. So 25 cents for every dollar that a man is getting, a woman's getting. 2018 for the men, $400 million. For the women in 2019, $30 million. So between 2019 and 2023, it went up over 350%, from 30 million to 110 million. But the men are still over 400 million. And 2014 for the men, $358 million in prize money. The women in 2015, a paltry $15 million in prize money, to be divided by 16 teams. So $1 million a team on average. So another, stat and number to look at. In 2018, the FIFA men's team, the US, got $38 million for playing in the World Cup in 2018. The women got $4 million, and they won the whole goddamn thing in 2019. You want to talk about ratings and ad revenue? Each game in 2018 and 2019, women's US, we're just talking US now, women's US team averaged 15 million viewers a game. The men, 12 million viewers a game on average. Ticket sales since 2015, we're going back 8 years now. The women's team have generated $51 million in ticket sales. The men's team, $50 million. In terms of revenue, Now, and I can't find women's FIFA World Cup revenue for whatever reason. Well, actually, I know the reason. FIFA doesn't want to disclose it because they want to still lowball women's teams around the world. But men, for the U.S., their media revenue in the 2014 World Cup, ad-generated media, $2.4 billion in 2014, $3 billion in 2018. World Cup revenue in 2014 was $4.88 billion and $5.2 billion total. I think that was overall for the entire World Cup. I shouldn't say just men's. Overall for all 16 teams, or 32 teams rather, in the tournament. FIFA said it's aiming for pay parity by 2027, which would be the next World Cup for women. How they're going to bridge that gap between $440 million in prize money for the men last year and $110 million in prize money for the women this year, I don't know. But all I do know is, based on the numbers I've seen, they've got it. And I even saw some crazy stat, and I didn't jot it down, that the difference between the Canadians men's team and women's team, when the women's team won Olympic gold and the men's team made their World Cup for the first time in however many years, they still got spent by 7-1, men to women. Now, at least for the US, someone can make the rationalization, well, why do you have to spend so much on women's soccer? They're already so much better comparatively to other women's nations around the world than our U.S. men's team. We're trash on the global stage, right? I mean, I want to say trash when you make it to the World Cup. Now, granted, if you're a host nation, you get in automatically, but to make the field of 32 in a sport where the U.S. men don't dominate, some cynical person can say, well, yeah, you got to spend more money on the men because they're not that good. The women are kicking ass, but the men kind of suck. It shouldn't be a 4-1 disparity at all. And if you can prove FIFA in terms of ad revenue and generation for women's soccer as a whole, that is close to or 50-50 with men's, then the money should be broken out that way. In the US, I gave you the ticket sales, I gave you ad revenue, right? That the women are just as good, if not doing better. So whatever the US men's team is getting, which is garbage, which is not a good team on the world stage. Are they talented players? Yes. On the world stage, not a very good team. If the tickets and everything, it's the way FIFA does hand out the money, then each country has the ability to hand it out as it wants. That's the problem. And I'm all for the women on this one. If we can show in terms of when you get to actually World Cup, TV ratings, ad revenue, other sources of revenue that the women's tournament generates and is just as profitable as the men, then those winnings and splits, those revenue splits should be even. But you have to and you have the money. What FIFA pulls in, it's almost criminal. And some folks have actually called FIFA, in a way, almost like an illegal criminal organization, the way they conduct business sometimes. So women's team, I'm all with you. Keep on doing what you're doing. And men's team, they're making you look bad, guys. I know soccer is a world sport, but come on. I mean, just look at Lionel Messi coming over from the Premier League. He's playing with Miami. I don't know. What does he have? 5-6 goals already? He's making people, and he's 36 years old. Soccer's a young man's sport. He's almost single-handedly making teams look stupid. Come on, US. You could do better. You shouldn't get paid for average or worse performance, and women should not get paid average or worse for a dominant performance. Now, speaking of performances that are between average and dominant, Anthony Davis of the Los Angeles Lakers just signed the richest ever annual per year extension. He signed a 3-year, $186 million max extension with the Lakers. He's now under contract with LA through the 2028 season, when he'll be 35 years old and probably on polio crutches. This is an average of $62 million a season for ages 33, 34, and 35. Polio crutches. He played in all 62 games in the 2019-2020 season, which was the COVID season where LA won the championship in the bubble down in Florida. Why did he play in all 62 games? Because that was his contract year. He's got to get paid, yo. In his 3 seasons since, he has averaged 44 games a year. Let's break that down into a percentage. He has played in only 54% of the regular season games per year he's been available for. Now, some of that is load management. Some of that is he's fragile. Some of that is he's probably a bitch. But when you're only playing in 54% of the games, that is not an investment you want to make, Lakers. And by the way, in his last 2 playoff runs, he's averaged 20 points a game. Not exactly dominant. Yes, he's had LeBron on his team also, but who else? Who else would be taking the ball out of his hands that much that he's only averaging 20 points a game? And Lakers, who are you bidding against? Who are you bidding against when he's under contract already for 2 more years? He is under contract through the 2025 season. Why did you extend him now? Why did you extend him to a max deal, which is $62 million a year? Are you going to give me the weak-ass reason, well, if we extend him now, it's cheaper than if we waited till the end of 2023 or 2024, at the end of 2024, see 2025, when TV revenue from TV may go up and he may cost more? Then you don't offer him a max. He's not a max. He's not a max player now, in my opinion. I don't care how much talent he has. He's not on the court. He's not a max player. It's pretty friggin' easy. He's not going to be a max player at 33, 34, and 35 years old. You're not going to be able to unload that contract. Maybe in the last year of his contract as part of a trade and salary dump that people are going to want, a final year contract to get rid of other players on multi-year deals. But what is wrong with you? Just because someone could get a max contract. This is the problem with the NBA. Just because someone could get one doesn't mean they deserve one. And the fact that you're giving one 2 years early to cripple the soft salary cap that the NBA has, and it's going to put you well over the luxury tax, and you're going to be a shit team. LeBron's going to be retired in the next year or 2. You're going to have a crippled Anthony Davis being the headline name on a team that's going to be nothing. And that's worth $62 million a year. My God, that's why, as much as we make fun of the Yankees for spending, or the Mets, or the Knicks for trying to get players 3 years out, saying, "Oh, we're saving for LeBron, we're saving for Durant, and those players never come to become free agents, or they have no interest in the Knicks, or what the Padres are spending. This is and the Lakers made some really good moves, and I had it in a couple podcasts ago for what re-signing Hachimura and D'Angelo Russell and Austin Reeves to reasonable contracts. Reasonable. And then they thought, well, we were too reasonable, so let's go off the deep end with Anthony Davis. It's like $62 million a year for every, 1,500, eyebrow hairs he has. What? I don't understand it, guys. Who are you bidding against? 2 years out, he's under contract. So let's stay on the West Coast. College football, PAC12. More teams are jumping ship. It's no longer a PAC12. It's like a PAC5 at this point. So if you didn't hear, University of Oregon and University of Washington football will be joining the Big Ten, which is now way more than 10, for the 2024-2025 season. So this season will be the last in the Pac-10. The Big Ten at that point will be 18 teams. Oregon and Washington joining USC and UCLA, who have defected, and will begin football with the Big Ten in 2024 as well. Arizona has defected. They've been admitted to the Big 12. Utah and Arizona State have also applied, and I can't imagine them getting turned down. Colorado from the Big Ten returning to the Big 12. The only teams that are in the Pac-10 moving forward for the 2024-2025 season are Cal, Stanford, Oregon State, and Washington State. So now you're losing, rivalries, the Oregon State rivalry. Now maybe they should still keep that on the calendar, right? That should be part of the schedule. Washington State should still be part of the schedule. And I heard, I've been reading people making a big deal about changing time zones is a big deal for student athletes, and we should be minimizing that. Come on, guys. Like, student athletes at the D1 level, when you're playing, a football or basketball, you're glorified students at that point. You're traveling. Basketball, what do you have, like 35 plus games? Football, there's 13 games, and then, you're really traveling once a week. Time zones don't matter. Let's be serious. The whole student and student athlete is a joke for a lot of these players. So let's not be sympathetic about the players. Plus, with NIL, a lot of these top end athletes are getting paid on top of probably getting a free ride and scholarship to one of these big time schools. So time zone stuff, garbage. And the Pac-10 can't just acquire teams from the Mountain West because there's a $32 million exit fee before the 2025 season. And these are smaller, right? This isn't a USC, a UCLA, a Penn State, a Florida State. Now, I'm sure some of these Mountain West schools can have $32 million to throw away on joining the Pac12 or Pac5, whatever they're going to be called. But why bother? Just wait. Do it at when the 2025 season starts. So this season, then the 2024-2025 season, 3 seasons from now, if you want to be part of the Pac whatever number, knock yourself out. But I don't think it's worth getting hit with that fee. And then it just leads us to super conferences, right? Like the SEC is going to be 16 teams next year in 2024. The Big 12 is going to be 13 teams at that point. It really leaves, what is the ACC going to become? That should be the third power conference. The Pac-12 is going to bring in more small schools. Each conference, honestly, when you're actually looking at the historic big conferences, the Pac-12, the Big 12, the SEC, and the Big 10, and the ACC, really only half those teams were legit, right? So you're really talking 40-ish teams, 30 to 40 teams a year that really are blue blood type of schools. And of those, half or less, probably around 10, really have a shot of winning the national championship. So even though there's the football subdivision where the North Dakota State Universities of the world are, they really need to do something else where you really have 50 legit big time D1 schools playing for the actual national championship, BCS, whatever it becomes. And then the other 50 or 60 can play for something that's in between the big D1 trophy and the football subdivision trophy. I don't know. That's just my take. We'll see what super conferences does to everything, but there's entirely too many schools in college athletics that don't matter in terms of actually being a viable national championship contender. And the same in basketball, right? I mean, basketball, every once in a while, you have a Marquette or a Butler that's going to make a run, or a Baylor, teams that were, and a team like a Butler had a good 2-year run where they went to the tournament, or the finals in back-to-back years and lost. But it's, you're generally, when the dust settles, you're going to have, of the 3 Final Four teams, or 6 of the 8 Elite 8 teams are going to be known household names. So it's the same thing in basketball too, but at least with basketball, there's 64 teams and you have a ticket as team, 45, 52, 61. You have a ticket to the dance. Anything can happen. Usually the better team wins out, but anything can happen, right? St. Peter's of a few years ago. College football, there's rules in place that, unless you're, in a non-Power 5 conference, but if you're ranked in the top 10, they have rules to get these small teams into a BCS playoff, but until it expands to, forget 8, 16, even then, these smaller teams don't have a chance. Let's just call it what it is. Cut in half. Give me your top 40 or 50. Give me the other 50 or 60 somewhere else, and we'll just move forward from there. And super conferences may go a long way in defining that. Lastly, we will move from sports to movies. Took my kids to see Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem over the weekend. Fun movie. I wasn't a huge Turtle fan growing up. They became popular kind of just as I got out of the whole action figure watching cartoons type of thing. But I did watch the cartoons. They just weren't, I wasn't young enough to really appreciate it. Rotten Tomatoes, critics gave it a 96%, audience 92%. Yeah. I'm probably closer to the 92 or 90 than the 96, but that's splitting hairs at this point. Really fun movie. Hour and 40 minutes, moved at a good pace, economical, and granted it's animated, but then again, I think Across the Spider-Verse was 2 hours or a little over 2 hours. That felt long the last 10, 15 minutes, but a really good movie. So Turtles Mutant Mayhem, produced and written by Paul Rogan, among others, and some big names in the voice cast. Jackie Chan plays Splinter, Ice Cube, Post Malone, Maya Rudolph, Paul Rudd, Giancarlo Esposito, and Rose Byrne, among others. The animation style, eerily similar to the Spider-Man Into and Across the Spider-Verse movies. Not a bad thing. That scratchy, sometimes not overly detailed type of animation fits with the frenetic style of the animation. It's go, go, go. It's quick cuts, fast moving, which a lot of animation even on TV is nowadays. But I think the animation style plays into that. And even with the musical score, even if it was just, melodies, if you closed your eyes and you didn't hear dialogue or you heard nondescript dialogue, you'd think you were watching an Into the Spider-Verse movie. Not a bad thing. And we'll see how many animated movies moving forward emulate that style. But a fun movie. You obviously get your introduction to the Turtles. Made some Turtles super fans were complaining how it revamped the lore. It didn't stay true to Turtles lore. Again, none of these, I've said it last podcast, none of these things are made for the super fan. Star Wars, Turtles, Lord of the Rings, Witcher, Matrix, superhero movies to a large extent, it's not made for the super fan. Plus, you have Turtles comic book lore. You have the original movies from the 90s, live action movie lore. You have a cartoon movie from 2007. You have two movies from, I think, 2014 and 2017 that Megan Fox was in. And then you have this new movie. So what actually is lore? Right? Like, what are we going best? And there's multiple comic book lines. There's the cartoon series, multiple cartoon series from the late 80s, early 90s into now. So what are we actually defining as lore? April O'Neil has changed from Caucasian to African American. Not a big deal. Who cares? The Turtles are still teenagers. Splinter's still a rat. You still have your Rogues Gallery, the Foot Clan. Actually, no, I'm thinking of, we watched the 1990 first movie, live action movie, and the Foot Clan was in it, as was Shredder. No Foot Clan in this. It was Mutant Mayhem, so they're just all mutants. So Superfly, the glorified Baxter Stockman, Bebop, Rocksteady, Gecko, Leatherface. There was, a whole bunch. They're not going to spoil anything. They certainly left it open for a sequel. I mean, I'm not spoiling anything. Obviously, the Turtles win in the end, right? And their whole thing is about wanting to be accepted. They live in the sewers. They want to live in the human world. I'm not going to go deep in saying, it has like a good message of acceptance or anything. Like, it's a kid's movie. We can understand how turtles, baby turtles that walk into some, green ooze mutant gel, become humanoid turtles, how they want more than just to live in a sewer. I get it. I never lived in a sewer, and I get it. It's a fun movie. I would see the sequel. When that comes out, I would see the sequel. It was fun, and they hinted at the return of a major villain for the sequel. You can imagine who it is because of who I did not name, who was in it. But I will leave it there. If you have kids or if you're a Turtle fan, I think you will like it. It's a nice way, especially on a rainy day, to spend an hour and 45 minutes inside in an air-conditioned theater. But that concludes the 49ers Plus podcast for today. Like always, I want to thank you for listening, to taking time out of your busy day, busy schedules to listen to me ramble on about 49er stuff and a whole bunch of other stuff as well. I'm going to try to be timely with the podcast moving forward. The 49ers play their first preseason game on Sunday against the Raiders. I am aiming to have the next podcast out on Monday. No later than Tuesday, but I'm aiming for Monday to make it timely with some thoughts coming out of the first preseason game. We'll see how much it actually matters when Shanahan already said that starters won't be playing, but football's back, even in a preseason capacity. Good 3 hours of watching. It'll be on NFL Network for anybody that is wondering. Just check your local listings and what your channel is if you want to catch that game. And each podcast, a subsequent podcast, I want to have the day after the preseason game, again, just to be timely if schedule allows. But until then, hope you have a great rest of the week and weekend. Be happy, healthy, and safe, and we will talk soon. Take care.